right, YouTube, here we go. We're sitting here with the mastermind behind DCDB Cube, Robert Green. Gracious enough to
Hello.
sit down and kind of answer some questions for us. Talk about this new season. I think this new season is going to be really fun. So I'm glad you can come in here and kind of break a lot of this down for us. Right off the bat, why don't you just kind of tell people watching the video a little bit about yourself and what you do for DC?
Yeah, hey Johnny, thanks for having me. Like you said, my name is Robert Green. I've been doing this DC deck building stuff since about pretty much 2015, so going on 6 years now. We came out with the first rendition of the rules back then. We originally had updates only every 6 months. In the last couple years here, we've had quite a bit of expansion with the game, a lot more players and things, and we're bringing updates more frequently. So now we're really working with an update every 3 months, 4 times per year, with our next one being basically right now. We're on the cusp of it tonight. So
Yeah.
glad to be here supporting the community, and it's a game we all love, and that's kind of how I got started with it.
And I know we're glad to play. I've been playing for a year now. I actually stumbled onto it. Me and my wife on our anniversary last year, we went out to the game store. Like, you know what? Let's get a fun new board game to play, and we found this. And needless to say, me just being who I am, I started looking more into it, and then I found the community. Haven't left since. I play almost every day. It's just so much fun. And then this format being so unique, and then you guys refreshing it and putting all this work into it, I'm really appreciative of it right off the bat. So thank you for all the stuff y'all do. But the first thing I had in mind that we should talk about is, what's your initial thoughts on Dark Knight's Metal? We've got to play it a few times, and it's fun for me. So what do you think?
Well, a couple things. The game format itself is very cool. I think Cryptozoic, just from a design perspective, really looked at what we are doing with the game with multiple characters, and they've embraced that idea too. They saw that,
Yeah,
players are willing to take this beyond just a casual game, and they can really balance a lot of triggers and handle a lot of different characters and things happening continually. So I'm hoping we get to see more of that, even if it's just with some of the expansions here and there a couple times a year. But it's really cool to see them making, cards that interact with the number of characters you have and those kind of things.
yeah,
Plus,
definitely.
there's one other thing I want to mention about it. The explosion of weaknesses in this set is something that we took to with the cube also, and we exploded the number of weaknesses on everybody
Already.
right in line with that. So we're glad to see Cryptozoic supporting us, and we're happy to be here to help support them too.
Yeah, and on that note as well, I mean, how's it feel to just kind of be embraced by Cryptozoa? You guys have done a few videos now. I mean, it's always exciting for me to watch. I'm like, yes, this is where it needs to be heading. How does it feel for you? And like, what are your thoughts about that?
It was actually really cool when Cryptozoic reached out to us to support them for CryptoCon 1 and 2 earlier this year. We did playthroughs of Dark Knight Meta with them. They had me on their site, and it was really cool to be able to work with them as the designers of the game. And I think it's the start of a great friendship with them for years to come.
Right, and I hope so as well. I mean, I see a lot of cool things coming from it, even with the things they were telling you about in your multiple sit downs, just the future sets we have coming, or even the bombshell crossover. Like, I think we got a lot of cool stuff coming, not only to DC in general, but the Cube. So I'm looking forward to that. And speaking of the Cube, specifically season 17, was there any direction in general you and the rules committee had just about the changes you made? Was there any general idea you had in what you were trying to do?
One thing you'll probably notice if you sit down and study some of the cards, there's quite a few changes just because of a huge box set, and we wanted to incorporate that. But just stepping away from the new set and looking at just some changes we made, there's two kind of main themes. One of them is in an effort to speed up the gameplay for decisions that may not affect much. And you'll see that in the form of interacting with the destroyed pile.
Hmm.
Especially if you take, for instance, the hero defense that lets you pull a card out of the destroyed pile and put it on the in the deck.
Right.
Um, that card was just, it could tend to slow a game down when players may not have been able to interact with the destroyed pile otherwise, but the player would still make their best effort to, pull out the card that I think may or somebody else may or may not get. But if nobody had those cards, it could tend to just slow a game down. So we really looked at cards that interact with the destroyed pile, and sometimes it can get quite big. And if there's 50 or 60 cards, you might be, taking a few seconds here and there to look through it when it just ultimately didn't matter.
Right.
And one of the other large themes that we kind of tried to deal away with was random cards coming off the main deck. So in effect, like Shazam to play the top card of the main deck. And that was really because as a player, what have you done to, set up some combination here? And you're really just looking to, of course, land a bomb card off the top of the main deck. But that's not really in line with deck building. And you haven't really, nothing you have done before this in the game has helped you for what you're about to do. And so we really tried to get rid of things like Abracadabra and Shazam that really played a lot off the top of the deck. We did leave a few of the effects in there, but now there's drastically fewer.
And you know what? I didn't connect the dot until right now, but also Riddler being in that vein as well, like of just let me
Yeah,
grab off
of
the top
course.
of it, and see
Exactly.
or X-Ray
Like,
not making it into the cube from Dark Knight's Metal, or even
yep,
Dream,
that's
of course.
specifically the reason that Dream and, of course, the one you mentioned, X-Ray, didn't make it in the cube, is just because those just happened to be printed right at the time we were doing this change, so it didn't fit our vision for that format anymore.
R.I.P. Dream. He does need to stay over there in that expansion, though. I mean, all actually got Dream early one game, and he had the other card that lets you take a medal for free if you reveal it off the top of the deck. So he was just going off. So I definitely understand Dream not making it over here. But also the 2-power 2-cost cards. Let me pull these out of here, the banned cards. A lot of those got removed. Talk to me about that.
We have had quite a few players over the last year or so reach out to me specifically with concerns about these, and they just they have some good valid points, and we wanted to try it out and see how it goes. So we just pretty much blanket across the board nerf the 2-power 2-cost cards. You're still basically going to have your kick stack there if you need the cheaper cards, but we did listen to the players, and we hear you guys feedback, and we're players too, so we get in the game, and sometimes it's great on turn one if you got the 2-power hand and you can buy one, but for the most part that wasn't where they were really causing the problems. It was just later in the game, specifically for some of those VP farm teams that might just buy 2 or 3 of them in a turn, not because it's a card they need for their deck, but just because it's a 2 cost card for 1 VP.
Super efficient, yeah.
At the other end of that spectrum, you notice that we actually just chopped off a whole bunch of power from the cube also, namely with super strength and speed force being some of those big top end cards. So now it's much harder to explode and get an early lucky card that might let you just start beating bosses. There are still some effective high cards in the high power cards, but you'll typically have to play more and do a little bit more deck building now.
Yeah, I was talking about that when I was going over the update. Just these cards that could kind of flip the game on its head immediately. You got high power one turn, now you have this amazing card, and it just ramps you up really quickly.
Yep. So now you're going to be a little bit restrained in doing that going forward because we just knocked out a whole bunch of those higher ones.
And on that note, I also want to talk about the cloning cards being removed. And these cards, I know cards like Plastic Man are still in there, but cards like Clayface and Magic Clone that have little restrictions, or even just Magic, you guys had an emphasis on getting rid of those, eh?
Yeah, mostly for their effect on replaying supervillains was a key aspect that one of the guys on the community wanted to do. So you might notice there's still something like a bat signal legal in the cube, but that's because we don't have equipment supervillains. And it was really the ability of if you get a big Doomsday or you get a big Lex Luthor, maybe you draw 4 cards and then you just turn around and Clayface him. It's pretty hard to lose the game from there. So we want supervillains to be ultra efficient at what they do, but maybe combined with these other cards, they push over the edge a little bit more.
That's a great segue into these being banned as well. Can you tell me a little bit about these supervillains being taken out of the cube? Lex Luthor, Hawkman, and Anti Monitor.
Yep. So I'll just mention a couple of these. We'll kind of put them in a couple of different categories here. Hawkman over here by himself. Because of the update we made last season, where you finish a full turn cycle before ending the game, so that everybody gets the same number of turns. Typically, what could have happened in the past is a few players will beat the bosses in rapid succession, and then the game ends before you really get a turn to play your boss. And now people are being able to get another full turn, and they can draw into their Hawkmans. And this card is just a bomb if you get to play it 3 power and 2 VP. And then, of course, with the players able to get those extra turns, even one more turn is all you need to be able to draw into your Hawkman and really swing the game. So we just noticed an extremely large, disproportionate amount of games where if the player had Hawkman in their deck, they almost couldn't lose no matter what happened the rest of the game. As long as they didn't lose their Hawkman, they were basically a shoo-in for number one. And if you look at the stats that we have between supervillains, it was Hawkman, and then way down the list was the rest of them, orders of magnitude lower.
Yeah.
Anti-Monitor. Yep. Anti-Monitor had some problems where it was his playability was just really not where you wanted to be for a 12 cost. At that point, you're really hoping to beat the next boss or do something as powerful as a Hawkman would do. And if you just compare their play text, +2 power and destroy some cards in the lineup versus 3 power and gain 2 VP, there was really the play range between these cards is about as far as you could get. So we didn't want players investing a full turn just to get an anti-monitor and then be let down that it's basically a kick when all they really want to do is use him to beat the final boss.
Right. Not to mention his first appearance attack. I mean, when it comes to that part of the game, I'm just praying I'm not seeing Doomsday. So me seeing anti-monitor, I'm like, okay, that's not that bad. It was just like, that's a really big difference.
His first appearance attack is very underwhelming. The fact that it can even whiff for a 12 cost if someone's hand is just so bad is kind of not really where we want it to be. And so, yeah, like you said, most people are more than happy to lose a kick at that point and don't even care, that kind of thing. So it's like you said, I'd much rather see an anti-monitor flip up than a Doomsday, or maybe it's a 13 cost Parallax that's going to just tear your hand to shreds,
Right, definitely. And last but not least, Lex Luthor. I mean, I definitely can see why right off the bat, but just tell me a little bit.
So Lex actually was one of our more controversial ones. And his banning actually has to do with the 40 weaknesses that we added to the cube. Mm-hmm. And the way we came up with those 40 weaknesses was we sat down and we looked at what's the absolute worst stacks you can have and what's the number of weaknesses it would give everybody. One of the options we had, and we have quite a few statistics, you guys are ranking games all the time now. We have a lot of statistics on the average number of weaknesses that players go through. Mm-hmm. And we thought we could pretty easily achieve enough weaknesses in this, what we'll call the reserve stack. But we wanted it to be ultimately fair, because if you just add 5 or 6, you're going to cover 95% of the games, but then maybe the stack runs out once or twice. And so we started looking through, and it was Lex Luthor's ability to give so many weaknesses.
Yeah.
If you have him legal in the game, you might need 75 reserve weaknesses, because if somebody's holding, a couple 10 cost and 11 cost super villains in their hands, you can start like Lex Luthor by himself can give out 20 weaknesses. And so with him out of the picture, the weakness stack can actually be relatively dwindled down to where each player can get approximately 9 each from the 4 supervillains that cost over 8. And so that's actually how we ended up with the number 36 was the number. And then we said, hey, these base sets come with 20 each, and that's why we went with 40. just because it's an easy, clean number for players to understand. You say, hey, grab all my Teen Titans, all my base set, and all my Heroes Unites, and we have enough. And so that was one of the main reasons Lex had to go, which is quite unfortunate because everybody loves drawing 4 cards.
Love it. But I mean, I won't be mad at just drawing 3 with Johnny Quick. So I'd rather not lose a boss worth of VP.
Right. His VP swings were some of the worst in the game, which is pretty brutal for an 11 cost as well.
Yeah.
He can be much more terrifying than a 13 cost that might give you, a parallax or something that comes out.
Yeah, and I mean, just after everything you've kind of said, it just brings to light how much work and how much thought you guys put into whether it's the reserve weakness. I mean, you guys put in a lot of work, and I know some people complain, but that's what they're gonna do. It's a video game, but I mean, I commend you guys for all the work you put in. I think it should be highlighted at some point how much you guys think and work on this game.
Well, thanks, and we're glad to hear that. And it's good to feel appreciated sometimes.
And now for even more appreciation, Deadshot being banned, man. Talk to me about that. That's one of the bigger changes.
Deadshot being banned was something that we struggled with quite a bit. And really, again, we looked at the statistics from all the ranked games this season. There's quite a few. And we love that players are using Deadshot effectively. But the problem is he triggers a little bit too often. His triggers are unrestricted, and you didn't have to do it on the first discard of the turn. It's not limited to just on your turn. And what was happening was a player would take 10 seconds on their turn to use Deadshot, and then they would take 10 seconds on my turn, and then they would take 10 seconds on player 3 and 4's turn. And we looked at the statistics, and games with Deadshot in them had well over double the chance to go to time and not finish. And we attributed it to Deadshots just having a couple too many decisions per turn. And so he was able to basically by himself just steal 5 minutes over the course of a game. And so ultimately we thought, okay, we'll push him up a tier and not let him be picked as much, but that doesn't solve the problem in the games where he is picked. And it's ultimately, again, because his effect just triggers a little bit too much, and it has you need to know the relevant state of the board all the time. And we actually compared him side by side with Red Lantern Supergirl. Mm-hmm. She's the girl that if somebody destroys the card, then you can cycle from your hand, which is a much quicker decision to make. Right. And it's also limited in its use. You don't need to look through everybody's discard pile. You don't need to strategically plan what you did last turn. It's real quick to decide that you want to draw a card and discard a Vuln. So that was kind of the comparison between these two cards, was to say, hey, Red Lantern Supergirl, she triggers on everybody's turn just like Deadshot does, except her ability is A, restricted on when you can do it, and then B, it's a much faster resolution. It's much easier to draw a card and discard than it is to look through 20 cards in your discard pile and decide what the absolute best card to stack is, and that way. So that was the reason we ultimately decided to ban Deadshot, just because he was pushing too many games to time.
Definitely, and I know there's a point in the game where he's just stacking the best cards he's got, and it gets frustrating. So that's going to be something that's very new and very fresh for all of us. So in general, with all these changes being done, I mean, and you kind of touched on it earlier, just what's the thought you guys went into the MC changes with?
One thing that anybody that's watched our last couple of seasons, I'd say the last 3 especially, we do watch what you guys play a lot. And some people, they tend to think, okay, over time you're maybe reducing the power level of the cube and things, but I don't really think about it like that. I think about it as the tier list is a great way for us to help everybody keep the game fresh. So whenever you see us do something like pushing up Simon Baz from a 2 to a 3, that's not us saying we think Simon Baz is too good for a 2. That's us saying that Simon Baz was played in 60% of the games this season. So we want to give you guys a fresh start next season and maybe not see him quite as much because, maybe people aren't as willing to pick him at a 3 as they are at 2. Again, he's probably perfectly balanced as a 2, and there's no problem with him there. We just saw he was overplayed so much that we want to give you guys a fresh game. And so we do that by just raising him up a tier, and now most likely players won't be as interested in him, and they'll look to other things, which is ultimately our goal. One way you can do it is just perfectly balance all the teams, but with this many characters, you're never going to have that.
Right.
So there's always going to be something that people consider the quote, quote, best team. And, rather than let the game just get stagnant and that team rules for 5 years, why not just push them up a tier and let the players come up with a new team? And that's really our main goal, is to keep everything fresh for y'all. We get update every 3 months, and the real goal is to push y'all's thought process and make you show me combos I didn't think of. And you guys, you always surprise us with great combos that we never dreamed you'd put together, and they're great winning teams. But honestly, we think that, those teams would have never been found had we not adjusted previous tiers and forced the player base into stretching their imagination.
Yeah, I could definitely understand the sadness of being bummed out when you see your favorite card gets moved up or just pushed out of a team you like to use. I definitely understand that, and Baz is a great example of being like, oh no. But as a competitor, I do appreciate having to be more creative and think of some new things as well. And I think one of those characters that's going to definitely highlight that this season is this Dark Knight's Metal Aquaman. I would definitely say he's one of my favorites out the new set. Either him or who else do you have in mind that might be a great addition from Dark Knight's Metal? Who's your favorite?
My favorite is, of course, the Wonder Woman. She's actually quite similar in her triggers to Aquaman, but it's her ability to cycle through your deck at basically lightning speed. She revolves off the superpower stack, which, of course, is ever present, basically. And as long as you control 2 kicks, you're going to town with her. And in our test games, I basically had the most fun I could have playing with Wonder Woman. And you just cycle through your deck. You don't have to worry about destruction as much, because she's more than happy to just cycle through and pitch these vulnerabilities for you. So I'm excited to see if players will pick up and run with her and see what they come up with. But she's the one that I'm watching to really break out for this season.
Yeah, and I actually referred to her as being slept on a little bit in the video I recorded earlier. She's going to have some amazing interactions. I can see it. Whether you're just controlling a detonator and like a molecular vibration, once you get those 2 control types for either of these, they're just going to start popping, and you're going to get to really have fun.
Yep, and these 2 are great with their control abilities. So some players don't notice that right away, and they just think, oh, I need to play 2 of this type. But it's actually the ongoings really matter, and you can start to do something like just leave a detonator sit and play all game rather than destroying with it. So it's nice that it gives those options to players.
Yeah, and what plans, if any, or any thoughts you have on the Dark Knight's Metal content that didn't make it, whether the MCs that didn't get rescued or the supervillains that weren't unbanned? What do you think about either of those groups?
I'll touch on the supervillains first, Johnny. Those guys just have so much VP value to them. We don't want it to turn into another case of Hawkman where, you beat the 9 cost that's just worth a tremendous amount of VP compared to the rest of them. So we might do something, and we're still kicking around ideas with those. But for right now, we haven't solved any situation where, do you leave them in your deck? Do you do like Dark Knights does? But their VP value, and we understand for the set, because their weaknesses go to, a different area, and you never really get a chance to destroy them if you've put these weaknesses in your score pile zone. And so they did these super villains with a very high VP count to overcome that. But in Cube, we don't have that issue. So we have a hard time dealing with these high VP value supervillains that they threw at us, and we haven't really found a great way to utilize them yet. But we're still, some players love to consider all this stuff, and so it's definitely on our mind here.
For sure.
About the main deck cards, most likely, quite a few of those had the same issues. If you looked at them, there's some 2 VP cards or some 4 VP cards. We don't want it to be another case of, oh, the card flipped out on his turn, I couldn't do anything, and he gets to buy something that's better, than my whole turn kind of thing. So while I don't think we'll incorporate many more of the main deck cards than we have, I definitely say this. Main characters, of course, we picked up on the captured storyline out of that set and we kind of ran with it. And so now our task over the next few weeks, since this update's pretty much in the books now, is we're going to go through and basically, right now we have a situation that's sometimes a little bit confusing to players, and we're going to clarify that, but it's where the main characters can be banned or perma-banned. And I think we're going to go to a set of main characters that are captured and banned. The banned ones being something like Deadshot that we don't necessarily want to re-enter the game. And then the captured ones will be all the others, such as, in this case, these three here that players have elected to bring into the game.
Yeah, and that's all I was gonna say. You weren't really intentional in the notes to say they were rescued. So now it all makes sense. Now you've explained that we're gonna have
Yep.
banned and we're gonna have captured. That makes sense.
And so anybody that's captured can be brought back into the game, and we're kind of letting the players take a spearhead on that. And so, in general, us as the rules committee will never bring in a captured character. It'll be up to the players. And, you guys saw this season, we let you help run the rescue missions for your favorite characters. And so that's how we're going to envision bringing in the rest of those. Is it's going to be up to the players to bring them back into the game.
And I really love the idea of that. Kind of moving in that same vein, Tap being able to ban transmutation due to the power rings he received. Can you talk about trivia and getting power rings and kind of having that power to do that? Can you talk about that process?
It's probably about 2 years ago in the concept, and it's essentially what it is. I wrote the program. The software just randomly generates questions about things that pertain to Cube. What does the card transmutation do? What does the Zatanna character do? What does Wildcat do? And then so you can go on the leaderboard and you can look at it right now and you can see the top 10 players that have done trivia. Most of them scores range around, the scores are in the 90 or above range. And what that means is a player got a list of 100 questions in a row and they answered, say, in the case of Tap's instance, he answered 100 correctly and got what's called a power ring. And we adapted that idea from the game itself because there's so many power rings back in the Heroes Unite set. We said, hey, people are going to get a whole bunch of these power rings and it's going to be something cool. And in his case, he just kind of took off with it about 2 weeks ago and started getting rings. And I'd kind of led this myself earlier, and I had already racked up a few, so I saw him get a couple, and I wasn't too concerned. But then earlier this week, he messaged me, and he said he's going to pass me. And I went and checked, and sure enough, he only was 1 or 2 away, and he'd been spending, just hours a day running through trivia, whether it's on his way to work or home or relaxing at the office, whatever on his lunch break, and he's just getting rings. And so since he did manage to pass me, I said, hey, that's the coolest thing, and nobody's ever done that. So, hey, why not give this player that's invested, just probably 50 hours over the last month in trivia? And we like to reward, any kind of enthusiasm like that in the game. And so I just threw it out there to him and I said, hey, just tell me, what you want to do and we'll see if we can make it happen. And I had no clue. You never know what a player is going to do when you bounce something like that off of them. They could come back with something a little too crazy, or in his case, he had a well thought out reasoning and explanation. So we said, hey, we got no problem. And especially it's one card in the cube, and it's like you said before, Johnny, nobody likes it when their favorite card gets banned. But at the same time, when the main deck is in the 400 to 500 card range, I don't have a problem banning one card. It's not going to make or break any team. And in this case, he, for whatever reason, wanted the card gone. And as a reward for busting me in the trivia, I said, okay, sure, I'll let it go with it.
19 power rings. I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. I think it's really cool to promote players playing and actually, showing some enthusiasm, as you said, whether it's winning tournaments like Johan and all did, or our guy, I don't know how to pronounce his name very well, Sanguinis, playing the most ranked games, or even tap, like getting those power rings. I think it's really cool. So I think that's
Yep.
great.
And that's you guys can read all about those. I've launched that page now, so you can see on the invites list down there too, where like you said, Johnny, and Johan had won multiple events this season, so we gave them a chance to unban a character of their choice, just as a way of thanking them for their commitment to the game. And hey, they'll come out and they'll play a tournament and just crush everybody because that's what they do. But it's good to see them on fire. And now, what I'm actually hoping is everybody else will take the characters they unbanned and beat them with them because that's the best.
Yeah, that's definitely what they deserve for being amazing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, last thing is, do you have anything you want to add? Anything you want to comment on as we close this out?
I'd just like to say thanks everybody for participating with us. And of course, I mentioned before, but you guys are welcome to message me or anybody else in the rules committee, just bounce ideas off of us. We're always willing to entertain ideas, and, we have our thoughts and ideas, but we certainly listen to you all. I'd say one of the things that I'll just touch on before we go is about Royal Flush Gang. If you want to pull him out, this is a card that players both love and hate. I'm certainly a Royal Flush Gang enthusiast. There he is. And this was one of our, probably, we've been talking about this card a bunch for just the last year in general. It's a great card. I am a Flush Gang player. I love to get this card. I will find some way to just play it 3 times a turn. I will never buy a single card, and I will just beat you over the head and win by 60 VP because that's great. It's another reason I love this card with Wonder Woman, which unfortunately won't be legal, but I'd be the kind of person that would do something like just buy it with Wonder Woman and cycle my deck to find them. Yep. Another reason it left now is because it was losing the support of clay faces and things. Often, even if you didn't have another Flush Gang, you would try to find a way to clay face this card or something to that effect.
Shapeshift,
and,
things like that, yeah.
Yeah, the shapeshifts are still there, but you really wanted to be able to play them multiple times, and you're losing a little bit of support from the clay face, magic clones, magic type things. And so we just decided it was time for this to go. It's a card that in casual games is great fun and players can, enjoy it in their home games. But especially in tournaments, it's a very risky investment. And so it could tend to clog up a lineup in a tournament.
Definitely.
Where you can't necessarily jump into a Flush Gang inside of a tournament where it may not pay off. But in a home game where you're having fun, it's worth going for it.
Definitely. I mean, I'm one of the people that's not sad at all to see it go. For 2 fronts. 1, me feeling like it wasn't as effective, and 2, Reno actually buying this during a tournament and bashing me over the head playing it constantly with Shapeshift over and over. That was one of those instances where in tournament his risk paid off and he just went to town.
Oh, that's good to hear. I love that.
Yeah. But thank you, man. Thanks for sitting down and kind of taking time. I'm sure we're going to get to do a lot more of this in the future.
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me on your show, and much appreciate you taking time and inviting me out.
No problem. This was Johnny Busket and Robert Green with the Season 17 updates. Thank you, guys.
Thank y'all. Goodbye.